Hey, it's Heidi from Lively Hope. If you've been around here very long, you know how much I love a slow stitching handwork project. I have a lot of different embroidery kits and patterns available in my shop, and I am just getting into English paper piecing as a hobby for me rather than something that I sell. And I'm loving it so much. I have watched lots and lots of videos on it. It's kind of like my background noise when I'm working lately. But I finally decided to try it for myself. And I didn't know how the pre-cut English paper piecing templates were measured. So I accidentally bought some that were much larger than I wanted. This is a 1.5 inch, I think. It's measured along one of these sides, and I just assumed it was going to be like the diameter, which is wrong. So, lesson learned for future projects. So the fabric I bought for the quilt I wanted to make does not fit these, but I decided I could use some scrap fabrics and just practice. Still using these larger hexagons so I could get a quicker finish and also learn how to do this process before I jump into doing a huge quilt. So what I have done is I'm planning to make a large trivet that will go in the center of our kitchen table. Family dinners are really important to me. We have 4 kids at home right now. Our oldest is going to be moving out soon. We've always been big gatherers for family meals. And so there's always several hot things that need to be put on the table. And I find that we're scrambling for trivets to use. And so I thought it would be fun to do one big one that they all sit on. So originally I was thinking I was going to make it really scrappy and not really have a pattern, but just be using up all of my scraps. And then as I got going, I realized it could be more of a floral pattern. Oh, hold on. I left part of this on the, hold on. Okay. So I found that I had a whole bunch of linen in colors that I really like. And I started working with it and found I had enough to do 6 or more of these flowers in 2 shades of yellow. You can see one darker, one lighter. And then I'm going to surround them. So I'll do dark, light, dark, and then opposite light, dark, light, and then blue hexagons surrounding each of those flowers for kind of the background. If that makes sense. I'll show you. It'll make more sense when you see. But then I also decided to, because I just got a new sewing machine that so far I'm getting along with. If you've been here for a bit, you know that sewing machines and I have a very sordid history, and I don't tend to do a lot of sewing on a machine because it frustrates me, but I am trying to change that because I love the outcome so much. So in that same bin of linen scraps, I found that I had enough to make a very scrappy backing to this large trivet. So this is what I've got so far. Let's see if I can hold it up so you can see. It is not big enough yet, and it's very wonky, which I wanted. There's no right way up or down yet. It's been really fun to work on. I did this all in one sitting over the weekend and had that moment where I realized about a half hour late that I had worked on a project for too long. Do you ever have that? I was just sitting in here kind of staring off into space, and my 20-year-old came in and said, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just sewed for half an hour too long." I was in the zone. But so this is what the back will look like. The front will be all hexagons, and then I'll do some running stitch probably to hold it all together with some batting in between. So this is the beginning. I'm going to show you how I am basting the fabric or it's basting the hexagons, and then how I sew them together. Again, this is my very first project, so I'm certain people who have more experience could explain this better, but because I'm having such a fun time learning this and developing this skill, I wanted to share it with you. So please, if you have tips for me, don't hesitate to put them in the comments. And I will set the camera up now to show you how to baste and how to sew the hexagons together. Okay, so I have my fabric cut and my hexagon shape. You want to have at least 1/4 of an inch all the way around. You can, pardon my neighbor's garage door. You can choose if you'd like to cut these edges off or not. It doesn't super matter. I'll cut them off just to give us a little less bulk in this. Okay, so I've got this almost completely empty spool of not awesome thread, because we don't need to use great thread for this because it's just the basting portion. Now, there are lots of different ways to baste. I like thread basting. That's my preference. But I'm very inexperienced, so take that for what it's worth. Okay, so I'm threading my needle. I'm going to tie a knot in the end. And then we're going to baste this around the hexagon. So I'm going to start by tacking this down. Oh, I prefer to have a thimble for handwork. That's just my preference. Okay. First one's always a little fiddly, I think, as you're trying to get the tension right. So I'm going to fold over this end, and we're looking for a nice crisp fit here. And then I do a stitch to hold that down. So you can see I've got this long stitch running on the front, and then this shorter stitch that's tacking it down. I'm going to just do that all the way around. So we're folding over the edges neatly and holding them in place with a stitch. And I am stitching right through the paper right now, but when I sew these together, you don't stitch through the paper. I will show you that in a second. So this is all almost done. I'm just going to come around and do this final side. Now you can see I kind of got it set up a little wonky. There's more fabric on this side than the other. In my limited experience, that will turn out okay. Okay, so final tuck. I'm going to do one more. Oops, almost lost my thread. One more stitch just to hold this in place. And I don't tie a knot in this end, because once we stitch all these hexagons together as you build the project, these will all come out. These big basting stitches will come out. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to showing you how I do these. This is one of the completed flowers. You can see I don't really trim it much into a hexagon shape. This one's gotten a little wrinkled from being in my bag, but that's okay. And all of these are basting stitches that will come out. These smaller stitches are what holds it all together. So I'm using Marrakesh Aurifil thread because it's what I have, and it does match up with a lot of the colors I'm using. I decided not to worry too much about the fact that it's a variegated thread, and so in some places this blends really easily, and in some places you can see the stitches. I decided not to care about that on this project. In the future, I might do something different with that. But again, my first project. So I need to grab a couple more of these. These are my lighter yellow petals for these flowers. And I'm going to cut off a length of thread that will allow me to stitch along both of these edges. I've just found that I like to be able to finish a whole run like this rather than reloading with thread partway through. So I'm switching out for nicer thread because this will be the final thread that is on here. And tying a knot in the end. Okay, so now being very careful to have my right sides together, I'm going to just sew this together. So I put my right sides together and match up the corners. And I'm going to start by just going through only the fabric. I'm not touching the paper. So that's the knot. And I want to make sure that these corners are really nice and crisp. And so I do like 2 or 3 stitches on each corner. I don't want them to have gaps in between them. So there's my third. And then it's a little bit awkward, but I'm going to hold this hopefully so you can see what's happening. I'm holding these 2 together. And then you just go through and stitch, whip stitch these 2 hexagons together, not going through the paper. You're only going through the layers of fabric that are just sitting right on the edge. I really like to use my thimble for this. I feel like it helps me push a little better and makes it so that my hands don't get tired or calloused too much. Oops, I pulled my needle off. Every time I post a video that includes me threading a needle, I get lots of comments on how I'm able to thread needles very quickly, and that, I guess, is a hidden talent of mine. I guess it makes sense because I have, as an embroidery artist, I have threaded a needle. I have threaded a needle probably 1,000,000 times. That's my guess. Conservative estimate. Okay, so now we are at the corner here. So I'm going to do 2 or 3 stitches in there again, just to make that extra effort to make sure that there's no gaps. And then, so this side is done right here. That's the seam I just did. Now we need to do this one. So I will adjust in here as needed. I just bend the paper. It's totally fine because that will come out in the end anyway. And now I'm going to secure the corner again. And then do the same thing, just going through the layers of fabric, not through the paper. This has been a really fun project to work on in the evenings, if we watch a show, or when I listen to an audiobook. I have found, so with a lot of my projects, knitting or other handwork projects, I don't have to look at my hands very much, but with this, I definitely do. And I guess it may come with time that I can actually watch a movie instead of just listen to a movie if we watch one. But right now, I really do need to look at what I'm doing to make sure I'm in the right spot and not stabbing myself or making my stitches too close together, too far apart, whatever. Okay, so we've reached the next corner now. So I'm going to secure that with 2 or 3 stitches. I always say 2 or 3, but what I do is 3. And then the final one, I'm going to go through and tie a knot. I go through the loop once and then twice and pull that tight, and then I bury the thread in my work. So that's this one added. And now the final one for this flower will have 3 sides. So I'll make sure to get an extra length of thread so that I can finish all of those edges. So originally I didn't have a plan for this. I was just making a whole bunch of hexagons with scraps I already had. But I've kind of settled on this sunflowery looking setup. I've just got it laid out here. I have 2 extra full flowers that I think I'm going to set aside and use for something else. And then I was originally going to have it be really scrappy looking with different color hexagons making up the background, but I decided I want it all to be blue. So I had to go into my stash and see what I could find. I'm hoping to fill in all these in betweens and then have one row around the outside of the whole thing that's blue. And then I'll do a patchwork for the backing. So that is where I am right now. Okay, so that is the steps to get to this point. And then I have this whole collection of blue hexagons, which should be enough, hopefully, to finish the background as well as one row of a border around the whole piece. And then I need to continue working on making the scrappy background bigger, and then I'll be stitching it all together. So that is it for this video. I will do a follow-up video where I show you what the front looks like, what the back looks like, and how I stitch it all together once I get to that point. So thank you very much for watching and happy stitching.